Ladies and gentlemen, what a treat we have in store here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show. And our guest here is part of history. And he's a part of important history, especially for our New York Mets fans, as he was a member of that 1969 New York Mets team, the Miracle Mets that won 100 games in the regular season. And they were the team that Met fans to this day still talk about, will forever talk about. And in his own right, he was a pretty good ball player for that team, especially in that National League Championship Series against the Atlanta Braves, where he hit .538. He only homered in 4 consecutive at-bats with the Cincinnati Reds. He was known as the Smasher, but now he's doing a phenomenal job in his own right with his new podcast, the Shamsky podcast, which just recently had on another great Met, and Dr. K, Doc Gooden. And alongside myself to talk with our guest is the Honorable MC Ernest Dove, who does a phenomenal job covering the St. Lucie Mets as an accredited member of the media, and also done a phenomenal job with us here on the Sports Report as our #1 source for all the latest happenings in the world of professional baseball. And without further ado here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show, the legendary Shamsky. My friends.
That sounds like a prize fight.
Well, we're on Sportinarian, and we do a lot of boxing and a lot of wrestling these days. So that's been kind of our theme here, Mr. Shamsky. And obviously, it's a tremendous honor to speak with you. Alongside myself is the Honorable MC Ernest Dove. And the Honorable MC Ernest Dove, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Nice talking to you guys.
And I'm good. I'm really excited about this. I mean, you can't really beat it. You know, anyone too, lifelong Mets fans, you're going to get a kick out of this tonight.
Absolutely. Listen, I mean, as a Mets fan who has not got to see the Mets win a World Series, just to talk with somebody who's actually won something, I think I'm a pretty happy guy to begin with. For our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarian, and Art, I know you just posted this on your Twitter, and I wanted to bring this up because we recently had one of the true titans, not only in the history of basketball, but all of professional sports, and the great Elgin Baylor pass away. And I know that you have a little history with Elgin Baylor. So for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarium, talk about what Elgin Baylor meant to you.
Well, you know, as a kid growing up and watching him play basketball, what a thrill for me. A big Knick fan in New York. I grew up in St. Louis, so I was a St. Louis Hawks fan also before they moved to Atlanta. But, you know, he was one of the greats, and I got a chance to meet him. I've written 2 books. The first one I wrote was about 1969-70 when the Jets won the Super Bowl. We won the World Series, and the Knicks won the NBA championship, the magnificent seasons. And I interviewed so many people over the course of writing that book. And when I was doing the Knicks part of it, and of course, they beat the Lakers in the championship series, and he was part of that Laker team. And I'll never forget I had to leave a message for him. I got his number from somebody, and I got this voicemail from him, Elgin Baylor, returning my call. And it's like I saved it because I just couldn't believe that I was actually going to be on the phone with him. But he was so gracious and so nice to me. And I just was awed by his greatness and all the people that I've met over the years who were terrific players, and he was just one of them. And his passing really kind of hit me. And of course, it's been an awful last year and few months of people passing away that I was close with, teammates, contemporaries, people that I've known, and it was just you know, it's almost to the point where you're afraid to look at certain things or pick up phone calls or read the papers because there's been so much bad news. But it was a tough day for when I saw that, and I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that I was honored to have met him and talked to him, and he was gracious to me when I was interviewing him, and he just was one of the greats of the NBA, and this was another bad day.
Absolutely, and our thoughts and prayers go out to the family of Elgin Baylor, and most importantly, every single sports fan that has been touched upon the career of Elgin Baylor. And Elgin Baylor was also the general manager for the Los Angeles Clippers, so he wound up doing a lot of great things. And just like our guest here on the Sports Report on Sportinarium, the #1 global radio station, the legendary Art Shamsky. And Art, you mentioned, unfortunately, it's been a very tough year, not only in the world, but especially the sports world and the baseball world. And I don't think there was one death that hit us harder than the one of your old teammate, Tom Seaver. And talk about what the franchise meant to you and being teammates with him.
Well, that was another tough day. having been close to Tom. And what's interesting about my relationship with him, I got a chance to play against him when I was with the Cincinnati Reds. He came up in 1967, and I was playing for the Reds. And then I got over to, of course, be his teammate first year with 1968 with the Mets. But you can see that he was going to be a really good pitcher at that time. Who knew that he was going to go on to the greatness that he became? But then as a teammate, he was a terrific teammate, a great pitcher. And over the years, we developed a relationship, as I did with all my teammates. That particular year in '69 really brought us together. And the second book I wrote, which is called After the Miracle, was about the 50th anniversary of that team, which happened in 2019. And in 2017, when I was writing the book along with Eric Sherman, we decided rather than interview Tom on the phone, we were going to take a trip out to California. And that trip itself was not the basis of the book, but it was part of the book. It's how we started the book. And we ended up taking 3 teammates with me, Bud Harrelson, Ron Swoboda, and Jerry Kuzman. And it turns out we could have taken any 3 teammates because everybody was close. But it was really a trip that was unbelievable. We kind of had to roll the dice because we didn't even know for sure if we were going to get a chance to spend time with him because he wasn't feeling well. And just to coordinate that trip of guys coming from different areas, to get out to San Francisco and then rent a car and drive up to Napa Valley where he lived, where his home is. And it was just an unbelievable experience for all of us who went there and spent the day with him, talking about that team and reminiscing about everything that happened leading up to that year and during the year, what's happened to all of us since, and spending time just talking about that particular time of our life and how it all changed our lives. All of our lives changed October 16th, 1969, that Thursday afternoon when we won the World Series. And when we spent 8 or 9 hours talking to him and had to leave, it was bittersweet in a sense because we knew he wasn't well, although physically he looked okay, but you could tell that he wasn't 100%. He was, some of the things he was saying, he would repeat, and some of the things he was doing, mannerisms, you could tell that was something off. And then 2 years later, he passed away. But which was still a shock because when you're close to somebody and you spend some really quality time with them, and even though you know they're not 100% when it does happen, it really kind of gets you. And the fact is that we've lost so many players from that team as everybody's gotten older in life. It's what it is. You get older and people pass away, but you still, when it happens to somebody that's really close to you, a teammate that you went to war with, so to speak, it's always a shock. And that was a tough day for me. And it was a year that in baseball in particular lost so many great players. And Tom was a great teammate, a great friend. And I think history will show that he was one of the greatest pitchers ever to pitch in the big leagues. You know what? I tell people this story of having played against him and batted against him and then was a teammate, that when you played in right field and he was pitching, you knew how good he was. You see games where he was just had greatness. But when I got a chance to play first base and he was pitching, you saw it up close and really and personal in a sense, because you could see how he worked hitters, how he had command on the mound. He was like a physician out there, for lack of a better word. He was a great pitcher and great games. And as I said, I think history will show he's right up there with the top of the greatest pitchers ever to play in major leagues.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. I mean, it's why they call him the franchise. Tom Seaver did is he put the Mets on the map. And you think about 69, especially what Tom Seaver did for the franchise, he will always be remembered. He's arguably, once again, one of the greatest players in Major League Baseball history, and he is the greatest New York Met in history. But that 69 year was an interesting time when it comes to New York sports history, because if you think about it, the Jets won in 69 the Super Bowl. The Knicks win in 70 the next year. So if you think about it, that year you guys were involved in, between the Jets, you guys with the Mets, and then the Knicks, I mean, that's arguably the most successful time in New York sports history. I mean, what was that like, being a part of that, where everybody's winning here in New York?
Well, what's interesting about those 3 teams is nobody had ever won before. All of us won for the very first time. Many people think the Knicks won, but they didn't. That was their first championship. And of course, the Jets, well, that was their first. And then ours was in October. Jets was, I think, January 12th. We were October 16th. And I believe the Knicks were May 7th or 8th of 70. And the thing about it is all 3 of those teams had the characters. I mean, of course, the Jets had Joe Namath and some other really well-known players. And we had some real, standout characters on our team. And the Knicks, of course, with the starting 5 they had with those great players, it just made for such an incredible year of sports in New York. But also what made those teams, and particularly the Mets, really significant, and which really has carried on this legacy over the years, is that you have to put it in context of what was going on in the city and the country at the time. The war in Vietnam was tearing this country apart. You know, we're in a world that's upside down now, but back then the world was upside down also. And the city of New York was going under financially, socially, spiritually, morally. And what we did as a team was we gave people hope, and they cling to our coattails, so to speak. And from about the middle of August on, we were unbeatable. It was just an incredible time for us to be part of that team. And if you look back on that year in terms of our team, we went into the season, nobody predicting that we would do anything. That was the first year division play, and a new experience for all of us. And we were still 9 games behind the Cubs as we went into August in that Eastern Division in the National League. And about the middle of August on, we were unbeatable. We just ran over them and over the rest of the National League East and the rest of the teams. And it was just a wonderful time for all of us to be part of that team. And I think put that in context of what was going on in the city and the country at the time, and what the history of the Mets was with such a bad team for all those years before 1969, really known as the lovable losers. That's what the team was called. And so we did is we changed that whole concept. And I think if you come from nowhere and win a championship, that makes it that much better. I think if we were a really good team in 1968, maybe finished second or something like that, and then went on to win it all in the next year, it wouldn't have had the same significance as coming from where we did, you know, in 1968 to winning a championship in 1969. And for those guys who were there during the early years, Eddie Cranepool, of course, was there as very young in 1962. Some of the other guys like Swoboda and Tug and a few of the other guys there were 64, 65, 66, those lean years also. So for them, it was just a wonderful 360 circle, because they went from being the laughingstock of baseball to world champions. So to be part of that team is just, for me, an incredible experience. And what's interesting is I played 13 years and nobody really talks about the other 12. The other day I did a radio interview with a Cincinnati station, and we were talking about the Reds and some of the things I did as a player with the Reds, but that was a rare exception. Most people just want to talk to me about 1969. They have vivid memories about that year, and some people weren't even born but know about that team from their parents or their grandparents. And they want to know about Tom Seaver's almost perfect game, Black Cat coming on the field, Steve Carlton striking out 19 when he was pitching for the Cardinals, and us winning the game 4-3. I mean, just it was an incredible year for things that happened to us as a team. But we had a terrific team. We had some really good players and great pitching and terrific defense. So, you know, we weren't pushovers. We won 100 games during the season, and we beat an Atlanta team in the playoffs that had a great hitting team. They didn't have the pitching as we did, but they had a great hitting team. And of course, the Orioles had I think won 108 games that year, and everybody thought we were going to get swept in 4. But we lost the first game of the World Series. I made the last out, incidentally, of that first game of the World Series. I have the distinction of doing that, but then we won the next 4. But we were a team to be reckoned with. We had a great pitching staff and timely hitting. And the thing people forget that what we had was great defense up the middle with Jerry Grody behind the plate, Harrelson at shortstop, Weiss, Boswell at second, and Tommy Agee in center field. So we had a combination of a terrific team, but we also had a wonderful manager in Gil Hodges who pushed all the right buttons. He got the most out of everybody on that team. We platooned in 4 or 5 positions all year, and he got maximum effort from everybody. And I think that was the brilliance in Gil Hodges, the ability to get everybody involved. And I think when you talk about that team, it's not just, you don't just mention Tom Seaver or Jerry Koosman's name. You mention everybody who played on that team, because at some point during the season, everybody contributed to the success of the New York Mets in 1969.
Absolutely, no question that everybody did. But you did bring up the Cincinnati Reds, and I got to bring it up because you just kind of alluded to it in a sense, your days with the Reds. But 1966, you had 21 home runs that year and a little over 200 at bats. That's arguably actually the best year of your career is with the Cincinnati Reds. And obviously you were part of history also with the Reds, where you homer in 4 consecutive at bats over a 2-game span. I mean, what are your memories of that? I mean, listen, most people just want to hit 1 home run in the big leagues. We've even interviewed players on the show here over the past 2.5 years, and I think they had fewer career home runs than you had in those 2 games. I mean, so I got to ask you that for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarium, what are your memories of homering in 4 consecutive at-bats with the Reds?
Well, it's vivid memories. The first 3 came on a game on a Friday night. I didn't start the game. One of my problems over my career is that I didn't stay healthy. You have to stay healthy. And even that year where you talked about, that year where I hit 21 home runs and only 230 at bats, probably one of the best ratios in baseball that particular year, home run to at bats. But you have to stay healthy. And over the course of my career, I got injured a lot, and a lot of operations. And so that was my downfall. And so it was it was a great year for me. Physically, I had back problems, shoulder problems, et cetera. But that particular weekend series was very vivid in my mind. It was a Friday night in August 12th. I went into the game with a pitcher-hitter switch. Let me try to explain that. When the manager takes out a pitcher, he can put in another fielder somewhere, and then that fielder will hit in the pitcher's spot in the lineup. So that's what the manager, Dave Bristol, did. He made change pitchers, put me in right field, and the right fielder, whoever was playing that day, made the last out of the inning before. So I would hit in the pitcher's spot. As it turned out, as fate would have it, I hit 3 consecutive home runs that game, 2 in extra innings to tie the game. We were playing the Pirates. There was a lot of home runs in that particular game. I'll never forget it, 3 in a row. And then we get rained out the next day. We lost that game. We get rained out the next day, which is a Saturday. And then Sunday, I come to the ballpark, and I'm not in the starting lineup. I have no idea why. I wasn't one of these guys that wanted to confront the manager. I just was upset that I wasn't playing, but it is what it is in my mind at that time. But anyway, remember the pitcher was Vernon Law, pretty good pitcher, Pirates, and he set me up to pinch hit. So I was trailing in the game. I think it was the 5th or 6th inning. I hit a 2-run homer to put us ahead in the game for now 4 in a row. And we ended up losing that game also. So I hit 4 home runs in a row, and we lost both games. So then we go to Los Angeles that Sunday night right after the game, and I'm not in the starting lineup on Monday. And now I'm really kind of going crazy. And I said to him, before the game, I said, Dave Bristol, I said, I can't believe I'm not in the game. He said, well, I know you were injured. I know you hit the 4 home run. I said, some not too good excuse. And while I didn't really get upset, I just accepted it because I wasn't a guy that was going to create problems. But then he sent me up to pinch hit in that game, and I lined a single to right field, and I got the ball in the air. I might have hit 5 in a row. So it was one of those kind of 3 or 4 day periods in your life where the ball looks bigger than it really is. Many games you play, the ball looks really small. So sometimes your focus is so good that things are different in a brief period of time. But it was an incredible 3 or 4 day period of my life because the papers in Los Angeles blew it up, and they were talking about it. I remember Vince Scully talked to me about it before the game. Of course, the great announcer for the Dodgers for all those years. But things happen in your life that you can't explain. It's just things. But the bat is in the Hall of Fame. I get many people contacting me or running into me, and they said they were up in Cooperstown and they saw the bat on display with special feats. There's always they have these cases up there for special feats, and so for me, it's always nice to talk about it. But it does bring back vivid memories. Those years in Cincinnati were very special to me because I came up in the minor leagues through the Cincinnati organization, and a lot of great players came through that organization, and which really was the prelude to the Big Red Machine in the mid 70s. I came up with Pete Rose and Tony Perez and Johnny Bench and Tommy Harper and Tommy Helms and Lee May, and a lot of great players that went on to play for the Reds, and then who might have been traded during the early 70s or for whatever reason, like I was traded, for players who ended up playing for the Big Red Machine. So it was a great organization in terms of developing players, but I've got wonderful memories about my time in the minor leagues with great players. Of course, Pete Rose, we all know, we started together in 1960 with Pete Rose, myself, and Tony Perez, and Tony's in the Hall of Fame. Pete, of course, more hits than anybody in the history of the game, and myself, all making it to big leagues from a Class D team up in the New York Penn League. So great memories about that particular period of my life, that year in 1966, and wonderful friends who went on to great careers. And so I've got great memories about that time in Cincinnati.
Absolutely, no question about that. But my friend, you're also inducted into the Hall of Fame because you're actually a member of the New York Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. And that's very important for a number of our worldwide listeners listening here in New York, especially in Brooklyn and parts of Queens and Staten Island, where we have a large Jewish community. And Passover is coming as well. So we want to wish everybody a happy Passover as well coming up here. So I got to ask you then, what did that mean to you to be inducted into the New York Jewish Sports Hall of Fame?
Well, I'm also in the National Jewish Hall of Fame also. So those are two really nice honors. It's interesting when I meet people who bring that up, and not necessarily people like yourself, but just average persons who come up to me and say, I read this, or I saw this, or I know this, whatever it might be. It always makes me feel good because I've affected them in a positive way. And everybody who talks to me about being in those halls of fame, they really think it's something special, as I do also. And so if I've influenced somebody in some way and I've gotten an honor because of religion or whatever it might be, it's always special to me. And so I enjoy talking about it. Hopefully I've influenced somebody in a positive way. And so for me, that's all good.
And I want to bring in here the Honorable MC Ernest Dove because he's a huge New York Mets fan, and I'm sure he'd like to ask something to you, Art. And he has been a Met fan for all of his life, and I know many of his family and friends are listening to this also. So I wanted to bring in here Ernest Dove and let him ask you a question.
One thing that's really cool to ask as well is because the Mets, like you said, I mean, they weren't winning before the miracle season, and then they basically just win like one more time, right? But between the miracle season, between you guys, between the 86 team, the lifelong Met fans have absolutely not gone anywhere. And I just wanted to know, like, what are your thoughts even now, all these years later, seeing what's still going on with not only the Mets and the Mets organization, but also the fan base? Like, what are your thoughts on these generational fans, regardless win or lose? Like, they've never seemed to care. They go with the excitement, they go with their players. I want to know what your thoughts pretty much generations later about this amazing fan base.
Well, I realized when I first came to New York as a member of the Mets that you were either a Yankee fan or a Met fan. And I knew playing against them when I came up with the Reds that when they were drawing really big crowds for not being a good team, I knew that they had a base of fans that were going to stick with them no matter what. And I think it all goes back to the beginning when they were so bad and people just kind of went with it. They were so hungry for baseball, National League baseball in New York. And I think they just became Met fans because it was baseball again, National League baseball. And I think they passed that on with their children and grandchildren. And I think it's just grew and grew and grew. And I think Met fans are really special. I appreciate them very much. And I know that even though they've only won 2 championships in all these years, they've had some really good teams that have been in the World Series, 73, 2000, 2015. So they had chances and they've developed a lot of players. And, they're always special. And whenever I get a chance to speak, whether it's in person or on Zoom or anything, I know I get these wonderful fans reminiscing about 1969 and talking about the early years of the Mets. And they're always going to be special. And I think this year, of course, they've got a pretty good team, and hopefully there'll be a whole season and we'll get a chance to see how they develop. And I just think that Met fans just generally are very special. Fans in a lot of other places are special too. I grew up in St. Louis, and there's not any better fans than the St. Louis Cardinal fans. And then Cincinnati had a lot of special fans there too. But New York Met fans, I can't even describe it. I just think they're loyal to a core in the sense that they've dealt with a lot of adversity. They've dealt with some things that have not gone well, but they keep coming back and they love their baseball. And I think that's an indication that I don't know what it is. They just love their game. And something about the Mets and their history and it's carried over all these years. And I don't know what else to say except Met fans are also very, very special.
Met fans are definitely very special. And that's also why everybody needs to go to artshamsky.com and also follow Art Shamsky on Twitter at Art Shamsky, because you can keep up to date with all the great things that Art Shamsky is doing, especially with the Art Shamsky podcast. And I know that Met fans were in for a treat not too long ago because you interviewed, as we alluded to in our introducing you, as Dr. K. Doc Gooden. I mean, talk to me about what that experience was like in interviewing Doc Gooden for the podcast.
Well, Doc and I have become really good friends over the years. I know he's had some personal issues and some personal problems, but I find him to be really a down-to-earth, fascinating guy. And I was so happy that when we did the podcast, I've gotten a lot of great response about it. He was no holds barred. He talked about his failures and his failings, and I really appreciate his honesty. But he had a great career in his own mind. It should have been a lot better. If you look at his record in 1985, one of the best pitching records ever in the history of the game. I put it in a class with Bob Gibson in 68 and Ron Guidry. What was that year that he had that great year? Was it 78? I don't have it in front of me, but
yep, it was 25-3 that year. Yep, with a 1.7 ERA.
Yeah, to look at those 3 guys in those particular years. years. And Doc was great talking to him. It's funny. I started off by asking whether he'd rather be called Dwight or Doc and how he got the name. What I tried to do in the podcast is that, how many times can you interview certain people? I interviewed Joe Namath a while back, and how many times has he been interviewed? So what I try to do is just try to find something that nobody's asked before, that maybe it's a little bit different, because, everybody, they seem to get the same questions. And then just to go back to the Namath, I know you want to talk about Doc, but just to go back to the Namath interview I did with him, I found out, and I knew a little bit about this, but Joe Namath was a great baseball player in high school and had a chance to come to sign a professional contract. And he was having dinner one night with his brother and his mom, and he said, I think I want to play baseball. And both of them said, no, we want you to have a college education. And they were adamant about that. Ended up going to Alabama and having the great college career, and then the rest is history with the Jets and pro football. He's still the face of the NFL. So I try to get something out of the people I'm interviewing that maybe somebody hasn't heard before. Otherwise, it's just another interview that the same old question. And so that's what I tried to do with Doc, and just talk about some of the things. I talked about his 8 home runs. He had 8 home runs in the big leagues, while he was pitching. He was a pinch runner one time in a game, and things like that. So I hope people enjoy that, because it's not your everyday kind of stuff that maybe he's talked about 100 times before. But it was really interesting to talk to, down to earth, and I appreciate his being candid and really a good guy. The best I can say about him, he's really good.
Absolutely. And I remember as a kid playing sports talk baseball on Sega Genesis, and Doc Gooden was actually sometimes the best hitter for the Mets. He actually, for his career, hit over 200 many times throughout his career. And I think he might even be a 200 plus lifetime hitter. So Doc Gooden was a very good hitter. He was a very good athlete. And that's why everybody needs to go to Apple and listen and subscribe and most importantly, the Art Shamsky podcast, and also go to artshamsky.com for all the latest updates when it comes to Art Shamsky and all the great things he's doing. And also, please follow him on Twitter. Absolutely.
It's funny you talk about that, because I found that pitchers like to talk about their hitting more so than they like to talk about their pitching. And he was telling me about one home run he hit off. Who's the guy? I'm sorry, I can't think of it right now. The Hall of Fame Atlanta pitcher that's a broadcaster now.
Oh, John Smoltz.
Yeah, he had a home run off John Smoltz. And so we spent a few minutes talking about that. And, I can understand it, because I hope on a personal level they don't put the DH in the National League, but I don't think that's going to happen very soon. But that's another story, another time. But of course, we can talk about that if you want. But I like to talk to guys about things that maybe somebody else hasn't heard about and find it interesting. And so it was great. And the next one I've got going up in the next few days with Mike Tannenbaum, who was the GM of the Jets for many years, and also the Miami Dolphins, and very current stuff going on, of course, with the NFL, with free agency and the draft coming up and all sorts of decisions. And the NFL has gotten to the point where now they're in sports pages every day of the year now. They've marketed themselves and been able to do this where they're now news every single day in sports, of course, of the year. And so I thought it was important to talk to somebody of that nature, to be able to talk about where the NFL is and his experience in draft and trades and stuff like that. And that'll be up probably in the next day or so. And thank you for bringing the podcast up, because, again, I just try to do a variety of things to get different things out there for the fans.
We know that you definitely do that. And that's why everybody listening here on sportinarium.com, once again, needs to go to artshamsky.com and also subscribe on Apple to the Art Shamsky podcast, and also like it. So listen, everybody is in for a treat when they hear Art Shamsky talk about all the latest happenings in the world of sports, and he knows a thing or two about it, to say the least. But Art, before we get your closing thoughts here, I wanted to ask you, especially for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarium, if there was one or two moments that stood out most in your career.
Well, of course, the 4 home runs that you brought up earlier is just something that's very, very incredibly special to me, because people still talk about it, and it's one of the highlights in my life. But if I had to say one thing, I think the first time I walked on a big league field, my first game as a big league player, those were special, playing in the World Series. But there is one moment, and I can tell you this, in the 9th inning of the first game of the World Series, I didn't start the game. I came off a series against Atlanta where I had a great series, 7 hits and 13 at-bats. But Ronnie Swoboda and I were platooning in right field, and Gil started him in the first game because Mike Cuellar was pitching. But interesting enough, Gil sent me up to pinch hit off Cuellar with the tying. I would have been a tying run at home plate. But I had a few moments on the on-deck circle before I went up to hit, and was just thinking about my life. It kind of went full circle in front of me, and I thought about all the times I played catch with my dad, all the times I played Little League baseball, amateur baseball, all the things I did to get ready, minor league baseball, all the bus trips, everything else, all the times I practiced, all the times I did all this stuff to get to this moment in my life where I was playing in the World Series. And it's every kid's dream. And so that kind of flashed on me in about 30 seconds. And it was a great moment for me to just realize that life works in special ways. And I was lucky enough to be on this team that was in the World Series, playing in the World Series. And then, of course, when we won it, as I said, my life changed on that Thursday, October 16th. And I'm able to do things with people like yourself and talk about that year because it's so special. And that moment there was very special to me. And so I think those couple things really stand out in my mind.
Absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, that's why we're extremely excited to listen to the Art Shamsky podcast and keep up to date with all the great things that Art is doing. And we are definitely looking forward to the future. And anytime Art wants to come back on and talk all the latest happenings in the world of sports and promote the show, we will do that at any time. And for you, Art, my friend, I want to give you the floor. I want to give any closing thoughts. Anything else you want to share with our worldwide audience listening, please do. It's been a tremendous honor to speak with somebody like yourself, and I can't thank you enough, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Great conversation. If anybody's interested, when they go to my website, artshamsky.com, I have some memorabilia over there. I have both of my books, The Magnificent Seasons and After the Miracle. And the best way for anybody to get a personalized copy is just go to my website, and they can get it through my website. And always great connecting with fans. I think one of the questions I get all the time is, don't you wish you were playing now, making all the money? And the reality of it is, I want to tell the person, of course, who wouldn't want to make millions that they're making now? But there's two things that are really important to me. I got a chance to be on this World Series team that we still talk about 52 years now later. How many guys can do that? I think the New York Mets, 69 Mets, will be talked about for years to come. And I think it's one of the few teams in the history of the game that when you mention a year, you know who won the World Series that year. You know the Yankees won in 1927. And most people know that the New York Mets won in 1969. So for me to be part of that team is very, very important to me. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And the Honorable MC Ernest Dove, I want to give you the floor, my friend. And it's another 2 for the price of 1 with you. And it's been a tremendous honor to have this opportunity to speak with the great legendary Art Shamsky. And I want to give you the floor. Please plug all of your social media. Anything you want to say to our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarium and all the many great Met fans who are listening to this. I can't thank you enough, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, this was a real treat for me tonight. So you know what? It was pretty awesome. So obviously the biggest shout out tonight, shout out to all the lifelong Mets fans out there for generations. They get to enjoy some more baseball talk, even from back in the day, talking some miracles and some World Series champions. So that was pretty fun to hear. You could always continue to catch me on Twitter at Ernest Dove, ERNESTDOVE. I continue to provide the best content that I can, of course, every week on the Sports Report on Sportinarium.com, counting down the days to Major League Baseball. And then, of course, minor league camps will be opening up very soon. So by next week, the start of next week, all the minor leaguers will be arriving. So I'm pretty excited about it. So obviously stay tuned for the weeks and months ahead on the Sports Report on Sportinarium as we talk not only Major League Baseball, but also minor league baseball around the league.
Past, present, and future, we got it all covered here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show with the best in the business, the Honorable MC Ernest Dove. So I don't know how we're going to top this one, ladies and gentlemen, but we will certainly try our best. It's a tremendous honor to have had the opportunity to speak with the great Art Shamsky. Most importantly, everybody can go to artshamsky.com and follow Art Shamsky on Twitter at Art Shamsky. And most importantly, everybody can follow Sportinarium on Twitter and Instagram at Sportinarium. You can like Sportinarium on Facebook at Sportinarium Media. And you can also listen to the Sportinarium shows on Sportinarium.com like ours. The Sports Report, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, we're on from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. UK time. That's Fridays to Sundays on Sportinarium.com. And you can subscribe to Sportinarium TV on YouTube at Sportinarium TV to all the great content that the Sports Report provides. And for you guys, I can't thank you enough. I'm looking forward to speaking with you guys, hopefully in the future. The Honorable MC Ernest Dove, don't touch that dial. We'll be talking with you here very shortly. And Looking forward to it, my friend.
Absolutely.
As we're here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show with the member of the Miracle Mets, the 1969 World Series championship team, and also the host of the Art Shamsky podcast, which you can find on Apple or artshamsky.com. And that is the legendary Art Shamsky. As I am the host of the Sports Report, the Reverend Tom Bryce, and stay tuned for the Honorable MCNSF to talk all the latest happenings in the world of professional baseball. And we're here on Sportinarium, the number one global radio station, as we were just with the legendary 1969 World Series champion and member of the National and New York Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, Art Shamsky, here on Sportinarium.